We're looking at Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17. We actually want to land down on verse 19. He is, of course, giving his, we've been talking about this through the week, and he is giving his feel and his relationship to the Scriptures itself. And in verse 17, Jesus says, "Do not think I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth shall pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law, till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called greatest in the kingdom of heaven." We're titling verse 17, "The Fulfilled Scriptures," because in that passage what he's doing is he's taking his whole entire nature of God that is found within the Trinity and he's planting it into the Word. In other words, the Word is the nature of God. So when you're going to the nature of God, when you're going to the Scriptures, you're actually going to the fluid, moving nature of God. This is not an academic study. This is not black ink on white paper. This is the moving nature of God. Second member of the Trinity, God himself leaped off his throne, set aside everything that it makes him different from you, and he literally was filled with the nature of God and entered into the Word, which is the nature of God. So the nature of God within him, which is the mystical, and the nature of God in the Word, which is the tangible, feelable, readable, literally begin to form and shape the life of Jesus. So when you're seeing the Scriptures, you're seeing Jesus, because it's really a description of Jesus, because Jesus stepped into the Scriptures and allowed the Scriptures to shape him. So when you're looking at the Scriptures, you're looking at Jesus. When you're looking at Jesus, you're looking at the Scriptures. That becomes important when you move to verse 18, because verse 18 is the final Scriptures, which means that all of this has come to take place, all that's in the Scriptures has come to take place in Jesus, and suddenly the Scriptures have been kicked into the eternal mode. In other words, the Scriptures are forever, because Jesus is forever. Because Jesus fulfilled the Scriptures, therefore the Scriptures are Jesus, and Jesus is forever. So the very nature of God, which is the Scriptures, is literally shaping the life of Jesus, which is the nature of God expressed, which is now going to be forever in the kingdom. Oh, that's phenomenal. And you didn't get it. Verse 19. Verse 19 then is, we're calling it the frame of the Scriptures. In other words, if you're going to be a kingdom person living in the nature of God, because really all of this is about you, because it's about him, because he's the prototype of what you're supposed to be. So if the nature of God is put into Scriptures in written form, and Jesus stepped into the Scriptures, you are to step into the Scriptures. If Jesus was filled with the nature of God, the mystical element, if Jesus was filled with the nature of God, then you are to be filled with the nature of God. So the nature of God living within you, as you step into the nature of God of the Scriptures, becomes the twofold dynamic that shapes your life into the image of Christ. So you're going to look like the Scriptures. Why? Because you're being shaped by the nature of God in the Scriptures. You're going to look like Jesus. Why? Because Jesus lives within you through the Scriptures, shaping your life. So the framework within which you're going to operate for eternity now and for eternity is found in the Scriptures. Do not step out of the Scriptures. Do not step out of the boundaries of the Scriptures. Let the Scriptures be the extent of the wondering of your life. Never step outside the boundaries of the Scriptures. Not what you've heard about the Scriptures, not what the preacher said about the Scriptures, not what the Nazarenes believe about the Scriptures, the nature of God. Stay within that boundary. Now, verse 19 is the worst verse in the Sermon on the Mount. And if Jesus would have come and asked me before he gave that verse, I would have said, no, don't say that. And if I could eliminate verse 19, I probably would. because it's very, very confusing. Because it literally, on surface, contradicts everything else he's saying. So you have to take it and you have to say, oh, forevermore, what is the man trying to tell us? For instance, look at verse 19. It's very, very difficult. And so since it's difficult, a difficult verse, it's going to be difficult to preach, it's going to be difficult to hear, and it's going to be difficult to understand. So this is a very difficult night. Whoever, therefore, think about these words. Whoever, therefore, breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Now, stop right there. That immediately has holes in it, which are very, very confusing. Because he's suggesting to us that you can break the least of the commandments. If you do, if you pick out the commandment that's the least, that immediately tells you there's least and great commandments. So please tell me what the least ones are so I can break them and keep the best ones. And if you can break the least commandments, he indicates that even though you break the least commandments, you're still in the kingdom. So obviously, there is a sinning going on within the ranks of the kingdom. So you can sin and be a Christian. And there are whole theologies in our town that believe that. So they would like this verse. And you can read commentaries that say that. So he's establishing the fact that even though you're a kingdom person within the kingdom relationship and you are living in sin, breaking the commandments, you're still okay. You're just going to be least. You just won't have the mansion down on Main Street. You'll have a cabin on the back 40 with an outhouse. But you'll still get in. So that way, what you need to do is get the best of this world and not the best of the next world, but at least you'll get in the next world. It says it in the verse. And yet everything Jesus taught and gives us contradicts that. So why would he be saying that here if he contradicts that every other place? So obviously that's not what he's saying. As you read on, of course, you read things like this in the rest of the verse, verse 19. Whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So immediately you've got this least and great thing going on in the kingdom. Obviously, there are ranks in the kingdom. There are those who are least in the kingdom. There are those who are great in the kingdom. Of course, those who are great in the kingdom have a parking lot close to the door, which has pastor on the sign. So obviously, that would be great. There are the least. Those are the boys that clean out the toilets. So you got the least and the great. And it's all dependent upon the commandment thing. Now, there are whole theologies that revolve around that. In fact, I've been taught that all my life. See, you're saved by grace, no question. You cannot save yourself. We all agree to that. Every evangelical church agrees with that. You cannot save yourself. You are saved by the grace of God. But once you're saved, work like a dog for Jesus, because you're sending up material for the mansion that you're going to get. And the more you serve and the more you go to church and the more money you give, the bigger the mansion is going to be. So if you work really hard, dedicate your whole life, if you would become a professional at it, as some of us are, then you could work full-time at it and really pump the material up there and woo! Mansion in the sky, chandelier in the middle of my living room, lazy boy recliner, hey, angel serving me, lemonade please, big screen TV. It's going to be great. Because I'm going to be great. You'll have to come and visit me. But listen, I'm not going to come and visit you on the back 40 with an outhouse. But everything Jesus says is opposite of that. That can't be true. And yet when you look at it on surface, that's exactly what the thing says. So see, it's very, very difficult. And I'm not sure I can explain it to you, but I'm going to try. Jesus may even be a little frustrated with his crowd. Not sure about that. Can't tell by the text. But it might be he's a little frustrated with his crowd. And he's turning to his crowd saying something like this. Hey, you're not getting this. I just gave you this whole business of the helpless, poor in spirit stuff. Blessed are you because of that, and you looked at me cross-eyed like I was crazy. I told you about the overwhelming comfort that's going to come if you will embrace that helplessness, if you will literally embrace it like mourning, like someone who's lost their loved one embraces grief and just weeps and just can't stop weeping and just is upset and can't sleep at night because I want you to embrace your helplessness like that and mourn about the thing. And if you will embrace your helplessness like that, the overwhelming Spirit, the comfort of God, the Spirit of God will literally come and fill you in your helplessness. And out of you will begin to flow all of this stuff like meekness and mercy and fullness and loving God and purity and even in persecution, joy. All of that stuff will spill out of you because you have this nature of God literally embracing your helplessness. And you're going to be salt and light in your world. See, I gave you all of that, and you look at me like, wow, we've never heard anything like that. That's so far out. And the reason you feel that way is because your whole culture has given you a whole different perspective. See, you have scribes. Scribes are the expert of the book. 600 years ago, Jesus would have said, there was a scribe by the name of Ezra. They came out of Babylonian captivity. Ezra helped with Nehemiah in leading the way and establishing the temple again. And Ezra and Nehemiah discovered the idea that the reason they got into trouble, backslidden, into exile, was always because they disobeyed the Scriptures. So obviously the law of God is the key to this thing. So they decided, hey, we're going to give the Scriptures back to the people. And they stood every single day, the people, from early morning till mid-afternoon, and they read the Scriptures, and the people bowed and said, yes, we will obey that. Yes, we will come under that authority. And there was a group of people that began to emerge out of that called Pharisees, who absolutely dedicated their lives to one single thing. We are never, you've got to admire this, we are never, if that's why we got into trouble, we are never, ever going to give up the law again, so we'll never get into trouble again with God. So they begin to establish the law of God in their culture. Whew, I'd like to do that. So that everybody will come under the domination and the control of the law of God. Now here was the problem. The law of God that they got a hold of was in the Hebrew language. And they only knew Aramaic. So it had to be translated. Oh, we have that same problem. And it didn't always translate quite. Got confusing some. And then, by the time Ezra and Nehemiah came on the scene, and they were out of Babylon captivity, they had iPhones, and they had iPads, and they had all this stuff, that the law never ever talked about. So what do you do with all that stuff? The law doesn't say anything about, the law is so ancient, and the laws and commandments that God gave, well, they were all good. Nobody's knocking the Scriptures. It really was written 2,000 years ago, New Testament, and on beyond that, and all of it, it's so far outdated. What does it have to do with my everyday, I'm driving down the road, guy cuts me off. Jesus never talks about that. So obviously you've got to take the Scriptures, you've got to translate it, and you've got to bring it into up-to-date application. So they did that. We're going to apply it. And they developed, as we've always talked, 613 oral interpretations. And the reason they are oral is because we're not going to write them down. We're going to say them so often you're going to memorize them. Because we're really after this thing. Now, the difficulty with that was, by the time you get to Jesus' day, with the 613, and this has been going on, what, for nearly 600 years as it developed. So for hundreds of years, they've had these oral traditions. But by the time you get to Jesus' day, they discovered you can't keep them. There's no way to keep them, all 613, at the same time. One reason is because, and this is just really irritating for a legalist, one law contradicts another one. So in the keeping of one, you end up not keeping another. And that's crazy. So how are you going to keep 613? And if you say, I don't know what you're talking about, Manley, oh, come on. Yes, you do. Because we've experienced the same thing. I experienced that. See, my rules contradict each other. And I have to play with them in order to get them to come together. That's the problem with rules. Oh, let me give you some examples. I've given these before. I wish I had some new ones. My dad absolutely would not take a Sunday paper. Bless God! Why? A paper boy had to deliver that paper on Sunday morning and wouldn't come to church. I'm not taking a Sunday paper. But we took a paper on Monday that was printed on Sunday. Do you know that in Indiana, Indianapolis, Indiana district, in the district assembly, the lottery had just come in to Indiana, and they voted that no Nazarene Christian, oh my stars, could ever buy could not buy anything in a place, a store that sold the lottery. Not one of them kept that one. Where would you buy anything? You couldn't even get gas. See, rules are interesting because they contradict. They found that true. So they developed all of these schemes and means by which to adjust and feel better. And I've given you these before, some of you. For instance, thou shalt keep the Sabbath day holy. Oh, yes. What does that mean? That means do not work on Sunday. What's work? So we have to define them. And there were a lot of these in the 613. One, of course, was the knot thing. If tying a knot took two hands, work. If you could tie it with one hand, not work. But if it takes two hands, work. That's work. That's work. Of course, there are exceptions. One exception is shoestrings. Your sandals, you got to go to church, so you got to tie your shoestrings. So that's okay. Another exception, your wife's girdle. Oh, she needs it. So you can tie that. You think I'm making this up, but I'm not. So you could tie that. You could tie that. See, it's the Sabbath day, and I go out that morning. Oh, no. I got 12 kids, and I forgot to get water for the day. And in order to get water, I got to take the rope, tie it to the bucket, let it down the well, and I can't tie on Sunday. I got problems. I got to have water. How am I going to do this? Oh, I know what I'll do. I run into my wife's closet, get her girdle. You can tie a girdle. I tie one end of the rope, one end of the bucket. Woo! See, there's a way. There's a way. You cannot travel on the Sabbath day more than 3/4 of a mile from your home. It's the Sabbath day journey. Where they got that, of course, was the tabernacle in the olden days, back in the wilderness, was in the middle. And then they did this concentric circle of thing around all the tents. Went like this until the last row of tents was up here. And the Sabbath day journey was from that last row to the tabernacle, which was 3/4 of a mile normally. Therefore, you could make that journey. Now, the tabernacle's gone, but they still have the law. So, Sabbath day law. You cannot walk more than 3/4 of a mile from your home. Now, in some ways, that would really be neat, because your house is 3/4 of a mile from my house. So I walk to your house, but I can't return. Oh, supper time. But if you're smart, you'll make plans, because what's your home? Place you eat. Aha! So you simply go 3/4 of a mile, put some food in a tree. 3/4 of a mile, put some food on a guy's porch. 3/4 of a mile, hey, you can go as long as you want. You walk, eat, walk, eat, walk. Rules are fun, aren't they? And they, Pharisees, began to look at all that and say, this is crazy. We can't keep all these things. So what are we going to do? Finally, they said, the thing to do is we need to focus on the big commandments, the things that really matter, the top commandments. And if we could focus on 2, 3, 4 maybe of the big commandments and give all of our energy and all of our effort to keep those, then we just kind of, the rest of them would just kind of, we'll just act like they aren't there. But at least we got to keep some of these, and we ought to keep the most important. So then the argument became, which is the greatest commandment? Now, you know in Matthew chapter 22 that the lawyer came to Jesus, and that was one of the big questions. Jesus, which is the great commandment? And he was going to get it. He's really skilled at debate, and he was going to get into a debate with Jesus, because they sat around and debated this like mad. I mean, all the time, trying to figure out what is the biggest deal? What is the great commandment? So they developed this whole idea of least and great commandments. So Jesus comes along and says, hey guys, I'm going to talk your language. Now, this is not my language. This is your language. This is not in the framework of what I've been discovering and what God is doing in my life as I've stepped into the Scriptures and as the nature of God has filled me and I've stepped into the Scriptures and the Scriptures has become the boundary of my life. This is not my language. See, this is your language, but you aren't getting what I'm saying to you about this whole business of being poor, being filled, and allowing, being helpless and being filled, and allowing, mourning, embracing, and allowing, and all of this to be the kingdom stuff, becoming a kingdom person, because you have intimate relationship with the very nature of God as it's spilling out of the Scripture and spilling out of the nature of God that lives within you. So he says, listen, I'm going to talk your language, not mine, to help you get a handle on this. And he begins to discuss their language in verse 19. It's interesting language. Whoever, therefore, breaks one of the least of these commandments. What's the least of the commandments? Hey, pick one. Anyone you want to pick. It doesn't matter, because the truth of it is, you have broken it. Let's quit arguing about what is the least and what is the greatest. And let's come down to the brass tacks of the fact you and I are totally, absolutely helpless and hopeless, and you and I are absolutely unable, and it doesn't matter what group of commandments you want to pick, or what oral traditions you want to develop, or what kind of self-discipline you want to imply, or what you want to do in your life. When the final analysis comes down to it, you have broken the commandments of God, and you are guilty. And that you have no right, you and I have no right to be in this place tonight and say to ourselves, well, I've never been that bad. Because the truth of the matter is you have been bad, and you are the absolute least for sure. And if you want to establish categories, let's establish categories. Pick any commandment you want. Won't argue with you about which is, which isn't. But whatever commandment you come up with, you have broken that commandment, I'll guarantee you. And that has brought you into a position of least. Because the truth of the matter is there are no degrees to sin. Come on, you know this. There aren't good sins and bad sins. There aren't all right sins and not all right sins. There aren't white lies and black lies. There's just lies, friend. There isn't little lies and big lies. Lies are lies, which are lies. And there are no degrees to sin. In fact, you run into this stuff like James gives us in chapter 2, verse 10 of his book, and said, if you've kept the whole law, here's the whole law of God laid out for you, and you have systematically done everything right down to the minute last step. I'm talking, you have kept the whole law of God all your life. Think of that. All your life. You've kept the whole law of God. And just before you died, just before you kicked the bucket, whoops! One little slip. You're guilty of it all. Well, I only stole 10 cents. I didn't knock over a bank. Stealing is stealing, folks. Amen? Well, I didn't cuss a lot. It only slipped out once or twice. Cussing is cussing. Amen? Well, I didn't plunge the knife too deep. Well, stabbing is stabbing. Amen? Well, I committed adultery, but it didn't take long. Sin is sin, folks. Lust is lust. Never should have got off on this, should I? Come on, we're guilty. Well, I'll tell you, I may have committed adultery, but I'm not a homosexual. Because your sin happened to spill out in adultery, and my sin happened to spill out in homosexuality. Sin is sin, people. Sin is sin. And Jesus says, come on, guys. Pick out your least commandment. And let me tell you, in fact, that's exactly what he said in the verse before. One jot or one tittle. See, you're talking about commandments. I'm talking about a little jot, which is the smallest Greek word in the smallest Greek letter in the Greek alphabet, which is only one little letter in the word. And I'm talking about a little hook. Remember the C thing with the E that makes it an E, the little hook? I'm talking about a little mark on the letter. I'm not even talking about a word. And even the little P is important and will not pass away till it's fulfilled. So let's just all hang our heads tonight and say, whoa, I'm guilty. Because whatever commandment you pick out, even if you pick out the least, it nails you. Which means that if you've broken the least of the commandments and taught people to do that, well, I've never taught anybody. Yes, you did, because the minute you ignored that commandment and acted like it didn't matter and could go on and do what you did, you taught your kids to do it. You demonstrated it to your neighbor. So you went around teaching everybody, oh, that commandment doesn't matter. So whatever commandment you picked out, you're nailed. Whatever commandment you pick out to be the least, you're nailed. And you have just become the least. Well, let's have prayer and go all kill ourselves. But here's the news. Here's the news. You have broken the least of the commandments and you've become least. But guys, that's what I've been trying to tell you. You're helpless. Because what's the difference between being poor in spirit and helpless and being least. That's what I've been telling you. You don't have a shot at this. That's what I've been trying to tell you. You can't pull this off. That's what I've been trying to tell you. So by your very admission of least and great commandment stuff, and the fact that you ignore and break the least commandments, you become least, which opens up the door of the kingdom to you when you embrace this least stuff. Because you see, in the kingdom, there isn't any category but least. This is really, really neat. See, in the kingdom, there's only one category. It's the least category. Why? Because everybody's helpless in the kingdom. Now, if you're not helpless, hey, go do your thing, have a big time, because you can't be a part of this. The only people that get in on this are the helpless people. So if you have found out that you are poor in spirit and you are helpless and that you can't keep the commandments and you really are least, and oh, good night, even the least of the commandments I can't keep, let alone the greatest of commandments, whatever they are. I am just absolutely, totally least, and you have literally opened up the door to become least in the kingdom, which the kingdom is the embrace of the least with his presence, and you have literally become a kingdom person in your leastness. And everybody who's in the kingdom is least. Well, that isn't what he says in the next statement. Oh, yeah, look at it. In the next statement, he says, verse 19, but whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great. So I'm not least, I'm great. Well, kind of. See, you got to understand it in the context of what he's saying. What's he saying? Hey, let's hang our heads and admit we are least. Why? We've all broken the commandments. Now that we admit we've broken the commandments and we're least and we're helpless and we can't pull up, that opens up the door to become least in the kingdom, because he will come with his overwhelming resource and embrace us, just like he said in the Beatitudes. And he literally would embrace us. Oh, and in that embrace, we would become the kingdom. And the minute we become embraced by his resource, his person, his nature, my leastness, his nature, what's going to take place? I'm going to keep the commandments, and I'll be great. Now, wait a minute. Are you telling me that here I am in my leastness and poor and helplessness, and I can't keep the commandments, but that opens up the door for him to come in his overwhelming resource and embrace me, and when that takes place, the whole Scriptures becomes fulfilled in me? I thought that was Jesus. So all the Scriptures becomes fulfilled in you. Well, I don't fulfill the prophecy. Probably that's true. Although you fulfill the results of the prophecy. So when the prophecies are climaxed, they're fulfilled in you. So all the Scriptures become fulfilled in you, and when that takes place, you become great. Only you realize it isn't you, because you're least. Well, how could all the prophecies, how could all the Scriptures be fulfilled in me? Oh, I don't want you to turn to this. I just want to read this to you. Just concentrate now and listen to this. I'd really like to eliminate this first statement, but it is there. I can read it. Owe no one anything. Oh, man, there went my credit card. Owe no one anything except to love one another. For he who loves another has fulfilled, same word, the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if there's any other commandment, all are summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. So whatever rules you want to make, whatever 613 oral traditions you want to come up with, help yourself. But he says, when I step into the Scriptures and say nature of God in the Scriptures, what am I talking about? Love. And when I talk about the nature of God filling me, what am I talking about? God is love. So the nature of God, which is love, which is within me, and the nature of God in the Scriptures, which I'm stepping into, which is going to shape me, and my whole life is going to be literally shaped by love, the love of God, which is going to cause me to love you. And that fulfills the Scriptures. Which means Jesus didn't fulfill the Scriptures because he did every little particular detail of Leviticus. He fulfilled the Scriptures because you couldn't get the man to hate you. And there was a constant demonstration of the love of God. And that there were no walls in Jesus. And it fulfilled the Scriptures. So hey, let's hang our heads and admit, I'm least. Why? Broken the Scriptures, man. I've hated your guts. And I've broken the least of the commandments. That sets me up in my helplessness, my leastness, to say, oh, love of God, could you come? And he would bring his nature and fill me, and I would become a kingdom person who would step into the Scriptures and let the nature of God in the Scriptures form and shape my life in love towards you. So the love of God within, the love of God without. And the minute that happens, I become great. But the unique thing about it is, when you become great in the kingdom, you don't care because you didn't want to be. See, the people who want to be great don't get to be, and the people who don't care about being great get to be. You know how many times he says that kind of stuff? First shall be last. All that stuff. Last shall be first. I want to be first, and you can't be. I want to be last. You have to be first. I want to be least. You get to be great. All that kind of stuff. So the whole idea of, I'm going to have a big mansion in the sky. The interesting thing is, I may have, but I don't give a rip because I don't want one. Hey, I didn't want a mansion down here. Why would I want one up there? See, I like white lightning. What do you think I want a chariot up there for? Some of you don't get that. Or maybe you think you do and you don't know. See, that's really ironic to me. That we've set up a system. I think Jeremiah was talking about the Muslims. We set that same system up. See, down here, I can't be materialistic. No. Got to sacrifice down here. But up there, whoo, streets of gold. Oh, man, I'm really materialistic up there. What? What are you talking about? Hey, if I don't want it down here, I don't want it up there. And if you're least down here, you may be great up there, but you won't want to be. Doesn't matter. What about rewards? Didn't want them down here, don't want them up there. They may be there, I don't know, but don't give them to me. So let's hang our heads We've broken the commandments, folks. We're least. That opens the door. And all the Scriptures can be fulfilled in you. Because there'll be nothing but love in your life. And if you say tonight, well, I do have a lot of love in my life, but it isn't all love, then you've broken the commandments, you least person, you, which opens up the door. It opens up the door. So do you see this? Your very defeat becomes the platform for your victory, if you will embrace it. Jesus, we don't tie knots on Sunday. We don't take a Sunday paper. We got all these little deals that we really pride ourselves in, and yet we can't get along with each other. Something's not right here. We've missed it. And in hanging our head and admitting we can't even keep our own rules, we want to open ourselves to be embraced by you that would literally bring a fulfillment of all the Scriptures in our lives, which would be you, the love of God, displayed through our lives. And one of our other guys said, you cannot control, you can't help the way you feel. God, I cannot help my prejudices. I can't help the way I feel. I can't help what's going on inside of me. I can't help it when I can't help when certain people I can't help it, God. And that very admission could be my salvation, couldn't it? It could be the platform by which I could give my life to you and say, God, I'm helpless. I'm least. I can't help it. You've got to do something. You've got to come. Oh God, you. And we could be a people who fulfill all the Scriptures. And would be great in the kingdom because of you. Heads are bowed. Would you let Him bathe you in Himself tonight? All the walls, all the division, all the anger, all the hatred, all the injustice, whatever you've gone through, whatever's brought you where you are, all the unforgiveness. Would you let Him bathe you in Himself tonight? Would you allow the very essence of the presence of the nature of His being flow into your life, permeate the depth of your being? Would you come in the posture of helplessness, leastness? Would you let Him do in you what you can't do? Be obedient. Be obedient.